I'm Michele Usibelli. I'm a fine artist working in Washington State and Montana.
Hello, I'm Chris Stafford, and this is AART, the podcast where we get to know women from around the world of visual arts. This is Season 2, Episode 19. My guest this week is the fine artist Michele Usibelli, whose work ranges from landscapes and animals to still life and figurative art. A Washington State native, Michele was born in Seattle in 1962, then spent time in Utah and Alaska before returning to Edmonds, Washington State, where she divides her time with another studio in Montana. Michele is the eldest of 3 children. She has 2 brothers, to John Hampson, a former Navy serviceman and realtor, and Mother Carol, who was a homemaker, pianist, and seamstress. Michele's childhood was spent mostly outdoors and playing sport. She was, she says, something of a tomboy, and she also followed in her mother's footsteps by playing the piano and sewing. Michele's interest in fine drawing led her to study architecture at the University of Washington and pursue corporate architecture. She also worked as Director of Marketing for the National Park Service, which involved extensive traveling. It was while she was on a business trip to Denali, Alaska, that she met her husband, and after raising her 3 children, Nathan, Jacqueline, and Angelina, that Michele returned to her love of art. Aside from painting most of the week, she also teaches workshops. Michele has won numerous awards, including the Silver Medal Award at the prestigious Salman Gundy Club in New York City and the UCI Institute and Museum of California Art Award. Her work is in the permanent collection at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, Museum of the North, the Brinton Museum, Wyoming, and her painting, First Light, Pioneer Mill Smokestack, was acquired by the state of Hawaii for their permanent collection. Michele lives in Edmonds, Washington State, with her husband, Mitch. Michele, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here. I appreciate you having me.
Well, you do travel some pretty parts of the world to do your painting. You said Montana, and now Washington State is where you live, in Edmond, Washington State. And you are originally from Seattle, so you're very much a West Coast Washington State girl. Then is it the water that draws you?
It has. I definitely am West Coast centric, although we do spend more and more time in Montana these days. Yes, it's just the water, family. I've come from a large Italian French family, so all of the cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents, we haven't ventured too far from the original homestead. So Seattle is home to me.
Do you draw your inspiration then from the landscapes, the seascapes in your environment, Michele?
You know, as we talk, you'll see I paint a lot of different subjects. I draw my inspiration, yes, from the landscape and my environment, but primarily inspiration's drawn from just the play of light and shadow in a particular scene, no matter where that scene is. So that's probably the main thing that inspires me, is the play of light in a vignette, in a little scene.
Are you painting every day? Is this something that you feel compelled to do? Is there an itch that you have to scratch?
Absolutely. I think all of us creative types, no matter what we do, it's like breathing. I think for us, we have to do it. We have to create. It brings me peace. It brings me a sense of accomplishment. I would love to paint every day, but because of the business side that comes along with art, I end up painting probably 4 days a week, and then do other art business related things the other 3 days a week.
Do you do everything yourself then, Michele?
I do. It has been a struggle at different times. At different times, I've thought about bringing other people in or assistant in to help. It's for me, I guess I would call myself a little bit of a micromanager. I just want everything I do to have my voice and to be who I am. So I just haven't been able to relinquish any part of this art process to somebody else. I want it completely and thoroughly coming from me, myself.
So if someone was to view your artwork for the first time, what would you expect that it would tell them about your personality?
I guess they would see that it was vibrant. I'm hoping they don't see it's chaotic, but sometimes there is a lot of activity and motion in my art. I kind of look at art as two different ways to view pieces of two-dimensional art. And one is it passive art where it's a beautiful scene and the viewer is enjoying the scene, or is it an active piece of art where there's motion and movement? And I would say majority of my art is active art where there's actually, I'm trying to capture an energy or a movement or some sense of flow through the piece of art that I'm creating.
Are you a high energy person?
Yes. Much to, my husband we're the tortoise and the hare. We always laugh. We always say if we were to plot our course throughout the day, mine would be 25 miles of needless walking and moving, and his would be 2 miles of purposeful go point A to point B. And yes, so I am. I'm always thinking, always moving. Ironically, art is the one time where when I'm creating a piece, I'm completely focused on what I'm doing. It's the only time I'm not thinking of a thousand different things, and completely focused on the task at hand.
So it brings you to a quiet place, a still place where you can isolate yourself. So what does that studio space look like?
The studio space, both in Montana and Washington, up above in Washington, I'm on my home property, but I'm above the garage. I'm up looking out, but separated from the house. When the kids were little, I could always look in the windows and see what they were doing inside the main house. It's like a tree house. Both places are like a tree house. So it is kind of my place to escape.
Is it a quiet place, or do you listen to music or something while you're painting?
I was thinking about, I knew you would ask me this. I was thinking about this last night, and when I originally started painting, it was a very loud place as far as the music goes. Loud music, not mellow music, definitely almost like rock and roll type music. And that's kind of how I paint. I just attack the painting. And now it's funny. I was thinking the other day that I would say a lot of times I go into the studio and I don't even turn music on. I'm just so absorbed in my thought process of what I'm creating. So, it just depends on my mood, I guess, but it could be either music or no music. It depends on, I guess, what I'm painting or how I feel that day.
Now, we know you come from Italian and French ancestry, so that could be the high energy there on the Italian side. What do you think you inherited?
Oh, I know my husband will always say, how did I end up with a French Italian? Because I'm emotive. I can be emotional. I can be busy. I think primarily what I inherited was a really strong work ethic from my family, my father, grandfather, grandmothers. Just that ability to set a goal and kind of single-mindedly go for that goal. My whole family, nobody gives up easily. I guess we could be called stubborn. And I think that's served that served me well in the art world, as far as just kind of set a goal and make that my priority to get there.
Now, you were born in 1962, one of three children. So I'm wondering if you were a stubborn child. Were you a high energy, stubborn child, or how would you describe yourself way back then, Michele?
Yes, I'm the oldest. I have two younger brothers. I remember, my mom, a couple times, my mom ran away from us. So I guess that tells you kind of what we were like as kids. We were very stubborn, we were very competitive with each other. We would constantly be competing on anything from sports to who could eat a can of SpaghettiOs without chewing it. We had all kinds of these strange little competitive quirks, and it wasn't. My parents didn't encourage that. It's just how we were, and so I think I always have had this on a kind of an inner drive to do the best that I can do. And my father was from a military family, and that pursuit of excellence, and never, the pressure with that also is, it can be good, but it also can have its negative impacts too. So never allowed yourself to fail can kind of get a little bit exhausting at times as well.
Were you an outdoor child?
Very much to my mother. My mother would say to me, let's come into the kitchen and let's, I'll teach you, we'll make spaghetti, or I'll teach you, let's do some cooking. And I would look at her and say, oh, heck no, I'm going out with Dad. I'm going to mow the lawn, and we're going to detail our cars. And no, I always outside. I remember even in kindergarten, growing up in Seattle, come home after a half day of class, and in the pouring rain, I would just put on my boots and an umbrella and just go out and walk for hours in the neighborhood. So yes, definitely a very busy, always outdoor child growing up. And still I am to this day. I try to be out as much as possible. I'd love to be outside.
Well, with having two younger brothers, do you think you were a bit of a tomboy yourself?
I know for 100% I was a lot of a tomboy. We laugh because there's a funny little story. My family has heard this over and over, but I was probably 9 or 10, and I was with my brothers and my dad, and we were out doing some errand, and a man came up to my dad and said, "Sir, you have 3 fine-looking sons." And my dad said, well, thank you very much. And I thought, wait a minute, I'm a girl. What do you mean? So I think, my folks would never let me have long hair because it was too hard to comb. So I always had a, very short pixie cut. And I grew up always competing, but I had there was no doubt in my mind that anything I wanted to do, I could achieve. But yes, I was very much a tomboy growing up, very into a lot of, did every sport you could do, would jog with my dad as a young child. I remember going out and working out with my father and hiking and jogging. And being active was a very, very big part of our childhood.
Which were your favorite sports?
I look back, having kids now, it seems like all these young people have to pick a sport and stick with it. And they do that same sport and they have to achieve these high levels. And, we just did whatever the season was, what that sport was that season. I all through school and high school, I played tennis. I ran track from early age, cross country, swimming. I was on the swim team. I did synchronized swimming, softball. I think it wasn't until probably my junior year of high school that I got real involved in crew, and being shorter. Everyone always wanted me to be a coxswain, and I wanted to row. So they actually had to rig the boat. I was a starboard side rower. So we actually rigged our boats with a starboard stroke. So I was in the front. So my short reach didn't mess up the rest of the team. But I would say overall, rowing crew was wonderful for me all during last 2 years of high school. And then, right now, at my age now, I still ski, cross country ski, snowshoe, hike, bike ride. So, I love to do a variation of things. It's kind of better for us if we can do that as well.
Did you ride horses?
I never did as a child. But when my middle daughter really wanted to, and so I actually started riding with her and did it for quite a while. We would take these trips into the Bitterroot Mountains in southern Montana and do some pack trips. But then, because I didn't grow up riding, I felt that I realized I was a little more nervous than I would normally be. And I thought, well, this is when I'm going to fall and hurt myself. So, I did it for a while, loved it. But it's not something that I would say I was ever achieved greatness at.
That was Jacqueline you were riding with?
Yes.
What were the influences then in school, Michele, when you were in kindergarten and, middle school? What kind of things were you paying attention to apart from sport? Because it seems the art came later.
Well, the art came later. I think in the family that I grew up in, art was always, even if my parents saw a potential, in their minds, art was not a viable way to make a living. So I was never encouraged to pursue my art. I spent a lot of time as a kid drawing and doodling, and all through high school. Actually, I went through a crazy phase. I shudder to think about it, but I thought I would be a fashion designer, and I would doodle, I design clothes in the margins of my notebooks. And then I would say the last few years of high school into college, I made all of my clothes. And, but it was just kind of a creative side of me that, I knew, or I was told was a hobby, but that wasn't anything I was going to be able to pursue professionally, which sad, which I've tried to, with my kids, I've really told them, pursue whatever your passion is, make that your job, because it won't be a job. It'll be a joy to do.
So in terms of early art influences, Michele, did you get exposed to galleries and museums?
Not early on. I think, it just, it's starting when I was a sophomore in high school. I took a technical drawing class, and I loved the technical drawing. I loved that class. And the teacher, the high school teacher, I actually ended up taking that class as an elective for 3 years. And he just put me on my own course of learning. And so I never was focused on the fine art. I was focused on the drafting, and that then segued into, getting a degree and becoming an art, in architecture. And then it wasn't until my second child was born that I had the time. Life changes. I didn't want to travel like I was traveling with my job, and at that time I stepped back and went, "Oh, art, something I've loved forever. I've been it's been void in my life since I've been doing architecture. And maybe this is time to start dabbling into that that creative side again.
I know that you enjoy travel, but you were traveling when you were for your work then. What did that involve, Michele?
So I always had to travel. We didn't travel growing up as a family, but I loved the idea of travel and the idea of being away. And I was fortunate to have been offered a position with a large company who did ran all the concessions in the national park. So much to my parents' dismay, I left architecture, the desk sitting at a drafting board. I left that job to become a director of marketing for this national company, and I had my clients were all around the world. So my job was to bring travel writers to our national parks around the country, expose them to the national parks, take them on special guided trips into the parks. And then I also went around the world sharing our national parks with other travel writers and travel communities across the globe. So really did that just, made such a difference in my knowledge of the world and just really exposed me to the beauties of travel.
So were you free and single at this time then, Michele, to travel as much as you wanted?
Yes. And I was able to, I lived out of a suitcase. I was probably on the road at least 2 to 3 weeks out of every month. I don't think I ever really even hung up my clothes at the end of the day, and was ready to pack and go again. Then I met my husband, future husband, and had our first child. And after that, it was too important for me to be available and be home and be a part of raising the kids and not be gone so much. So that was kind of the catalyst to kind of this revamping of my life and kind of taking a pause and looking at what's really important to me. And it was really important to me that my kids saw mom have a passion, no matter what that passion was. And so that's when I took the time to kind of revisit and reignite that flame when it came to painting and art.
Where did you meet your husband, Mitch?
So when I was working in the national parks, I had an apartment up in Denali, which is interior of Alaska, Denali National Park, not far from where my husband grew up. And one of my great friends at work was a college roommate of my future husband. And he when we were all up in Fairbanks for a meeting, he, unbeknownst to me, orchestrated a meeting so the two of us could meet. So we met that kind of on a blind date.
And where did you get married?
We got married. So we were, a little bit older. We actually, his family, he has a brother still up in Alaska. He was living in Alaska, but many of his family, his mom, his siblings had moved to Washington State. So, and all my family was in Washington State. We actually got married at Snoqualmie Falls Lodge, which is in the mountains right outside of Seattle. And it was this kind of a whirlwind romance. And then we got married and then moved back up to Alaska for about a year. And then we decided to move back to Washington State to be closer to all of our families.
So you were raising 3 children then, eventually. Mm-hmm. When did the art creep in? When did you first start to have time or make the time to paint?
Well, I think, speaking to so many women, a lot of women have been painting, and then when they have kids, they because of the time and the commitment involved, take a break and then maybe pick up painting later. A lot of people start painting after their kids are a little bit older, maybe back in school, they have some more time. But, my dad always said that I took the course of most resistance. And so, of course, I had Nathan, the oldest, and then 14 months later, I had Jackie. And I think it was after Jackie was born, I thought, okay, it's going to be a while till I can get back to any type of corporate job. And my husband, for Christmas, the year that my daughter was born, went down to our local art store and had bought me a series of art lessons, because he knew that was something I'd always had in the back of my mind, but I just needed a little push. And so for a holiday, I got an art class. So every Friday with a 14-month-old, or probably 20-month-old and a 6-month-old, I would hire a babysitter. And every Friday for about a year or two, I would go take a class. So I kind of got into painting right in the middle of all the craziness of my life. But, it was sometimes like chewing ground glass to kind of get out of the house and make that time. I felt guilty sometimes, but I know the overriding thought was, this is for me. It's a passion. It's something I have to do. It's great for my kids to see me having my own thing. And so I just I just burned the candle at both ends for so many years, to be able to at least kind of make headway with my art and fulfilling that passion I have to create, while priority was, being home with the kids. I kind of was wearing multiple hats during those years.
And what sort of art would we have seen then? Because now it's so varied with your landscapes, your animals, even still life. You have such variety. I'm wondering where you began.
So I've always had the need to create just what inspires me. I never wanted to be put into a box as you're a landscape painter or you're a portrait painter. I just, the way my mind works or what inspires me, it could be, it's so many different genres. So I think, looking at the early days, you would have seen multiple genres. I might paint a landscape one day, a still life another, but my struggle was coming from architecture. I'd had a lot of drawing classes, a lot of technical drawing. I spent years and years through high school and college doing drawing. So I had the drawing skills. I'd never painted. So it was learning about paint application, learning about color mixing, color theory, all of those color sides of the creative process. My struggle was, though, coming from architecture, everything I had done was so tightly rendered and everything was perfect. And, the writing, I had 1 year of class just teaching you how to do the architectural fonts and how to write your name in the architectural style. I knew in my mind, I wanted to paint more abstracted shapes. I didn't want to paint tight realism. So I think you would have seen early on, my work was much more tightly rendered than it is. And I'm still not even there in my goal of where I would like to be. It's just, it continues to be such a learning process. But I keep my first painting I ever did. I have it in my studio. And when I teach, at the end of the workshop, when everybody is feeling grumbly and frustrated, I pull out this first painting I ever did. And I said, look at this. This is where I started. And everyone just, they're like, no, that wasn't yours. No way. I'll go, yes, it's horrible. It's horrible. It was horrible, but it was part of my journey. And, So long answer to your question, but you would have seen somebody really struggling to create, like, to what's in my mind, to put that on canvas. And that was a huge struggle for for quite a while, actually, for years.
I've seen a painting of yours with the house and the sun reflecting on the house, and there's an orange tree in the foreground. And so much of this is, I think, is you, very much you, with the correctness of how the house is rendered. When you look at that now, I'm not sure when you painted that, but is that where you were aiming for, or are you still in transition with that type of painting?
I feel that, and I know artists say this, the more you know and the more you learn on our art journey, I feel that's the more you realize you don't know. So I feel now, 20 years into my painting journey, that I have so much more to learn. I'm so far from, I don't think there's ever an end stage where we say, I've got it. I figured it all out. This is exactly where I want to be. I think for us to continue to create and explore and to grow, the target keeps moving as we learn more and more. So when I first started painting, I thought, oh yeah, I get this. I've got it figured out. And boy, I realized I knew nothing then. I really know nothing now. It's just part of our journey. But I feel over the last few years, I actually do a PowerPoint presentation where I show my reference photo for my project, my painting, and my final painting. And I'm sharing with the viewers just how much artistic license and interpretation, my own color choices, my own design that I bring in. Very rare do the colors in my final painting match the color in my reference photo. So, that whole creative license and that ability to adapt a scene and make it my own, I continue to explore and to push the limits when it comes to that.
And we'll be back with more after this short commercial break, so don't go away. And I'm back with my guest, the fine artist Michele Usibelli. Do you travel back to Europe, to your French and Italian ancestry, and look at art in a different way when you're there? Do you come back inspired?
Oh, always. I come back inspired. I think as artists, everywhere we go, I don't think we ever just fleetingly pass through life. And I mean, I think we stop and we analyze a scene, and we look at colors and we look at shadow patterns. And, I along with the art, for sure, excuse me, for sure with the art, I mean, just to see in person, there's nothing like viewing art in person. Excuse me. Just to see the strokes, the color, just that intimacy that you get when you're viewing it in person is so much different than viewing it through a catalog or just in an image. But so of course I'm inspired when I'm able to see that some of the great pieces of art when I'm traveling like that. But just also you realize around the different parts of the world, how the light changes, how the palette, if I'm painting in Italy, it's a different set of colors, a different palette, just little nuances for each place, and that's intriguing, and it's beautiful, and it's so wonderful to be able to look at the world a little more intensely, and you find yourself analyzing things a lot more than just maybe somebody who's not thinking of it from an art standpoint.
Do you have a favorite light?
Well, early morning, for plein air painters. So that plein air is being outside, painting from life, direct painting, observing and painting, not looking at a reference photo. Early morning light is beautiful. Midday light, when the sun's high, everything is a little bit washed out. It's a little bit too flat, that light. And then the evening glow, especially in Alaska, you get 24 hours of daylight, but you have, like, at 11 p.m., you get this alpenglow the sky is lavender and the reflection on the mountains is golden. And, so for me, it would be the early morning, right at sunrise, or just that period of time right before sunset, the light, just because I'm also inspired by the temperature, light and shadow, and the different temperatures in a scene. And that's when those are the most exaggerated during the day.
I'm wondering what kind of feelings you get from painting today that you might not have got years ago when you started, when you were learning. That, I'm sure, has evolved. Can you describe it now?
Sure. Well, not in a kind of a segue, when I'm painting plein air outside, it's truly it's one of the times where you're really getting absorbed into a scene. And there's nothing better if we're painting, if I'm in a new location. I was just in Florida teaching a class last month, and was able to get out and paint. And when you're spending 2 hours painting, the sights, the sounds, the smells, observing the light, the color, I mean, you really do feel like you're creating an intimate relationship with that particular place. And so there's nothing that's more special than painting outside and from life. But we get, a lot of times I am in the studio, and what I find now, I'm trying to bring my experience from painting from life as I progress through the years and painting more and more. I'm trying to bring those feelings and the lessons and the thoughts that I get when I'm painting from life, trying to bring that into the studio, so that my work in the studio is achieving that level of energy and kind of freshness that I would get as if I were painting outside.
What would you say art has taught you, or inspired you, or brought you to the person you are now? I'm wondering how it's impacted your personality, your character, and indeed your behavior, your feeling of place and what's right and where you belong.
That's a great question. I feel one thing, this is just a side note, that I'm very, as I mentioned before, set a goal. I'm very goal oriented. But one thing that kind of a surprising result of art is at the end of the day, for me, it's very fulfilling for me to look and say, this is the fruits of my day. This is a tangible thing that I created today. So to me, kind of, it's something I can look and say, this is what was accomplished. It's just it's very fulfilling for me for that. Art has holistically, though, has made me really be able to focus, kind of just stop and pause. It's given me a purpose. It's given me a greater purpose, a sense of accomplishment. It's just to be able, to be thankful for that gift I have, that I can look, I can plan to, I will have to paint as long as I can, because it's something that's in my bones, and just to know that I have this in my life, and to have this ability to create and find my space is for me a very very calming element to my life, which I don't think I really had anything else up to this that gave me that feeling of kind of peace and harmony and purpose.
What makes you most proud then, would you say, Michele? Because you teach as well, you teach workshops, and you obviously spend a lot of time in nature and in the studio. You have different environments and different places to be. What's the most satisfying for you? I'm just curious as to how it's shaped you and what you feel is most fulfilling about your artwork and what it does for you.
Yeah, I think early on, I thought I would feel the most fulfilled if I set these arbitrary goal, like getting into a specific gallery or getting juried into a specific show. I've maybe gotten older, I've become my art's become more known. It's not those goals that are the most fulfilling, or to me, for me, I've grown to embrace and value just the time that I've carved away to be able to create. And I don't compare myself to any other painter. My successes or my goals are based truly on me being able to give myself the freedom to experiment and to create, and just to create without expectation, I guess, is where I've come. And I think the success has come with this kind of me releasing these arbitrary goals, and really my goals being just to be the best painter personally that I can be. I'm super competitive with myself as far as okay, I love this painting, but next time I'm going to push this direction, or it's just between, the art is just between me and my art, and nothing else interferes with that formula for me.
Do you take this to the dining room table and the family meals? Is this a topic of conversation of how your art has been this day?
Not really. It's funny, when my kids were little, they all thought I was famous, and I remember we were somewhere doing something, and I was with my son, and I had to give my name, and they asked me to spell it. And so I spelled it. And then my son looked at me and he went, "You're not famous. They didn't know who you were." I go, "No, I'm not famous." So I think early on, it was a big part. I mean, each of my children had an easel up in the studio. So when we were all painting together. They had their canvas and paints out, and I did mine, and it was a very much a part of their lives. And then as they've gotten older and gone on with their own lives, I mean, they still are very, very supportive, and they're super proud. My husband has been the biggest supporter. I mean, obviously, with 3 children, I could never have done what I was able to do time wise, and just be able to share my journey with him. It was amazing. But I think now that the kids are out of the house, it's kind of my own. It's kind of my own journey. I think I involve my family in those highlights and different aspects of it. But it's kind of my journey.
Does your husband critique your work? Is he the first person you call into the studio when you finished a piece?
He has a great eye, and I'm really fortunate. He has a great eye, and I would say for the most part, I do listen to what he says. But I'll bring a piece, bring a piece from the studio that I think is done, but maybe there's one passage in it that I'm little not quite sure about, but I think it's it'll pass. And I put it up on the mantle and he'll come in and he'll say, that's not that piece right there. That I'm like, oh, really? He goes, no, yeah, you got to redo that. So he used more and more. I don't get that critique from him like that, but for a long time, and I still do really value his, because we get so tunnel vision when we're working on our art, we're creating. You don't sometimes see something that's glaring. And it is wonderful to have somebody else who you trust, who you can look at something and give you the thumbs up or the thumbs down.
Now, you have mentioned, I read, I think, on your website that you were inspired by some notable artists like John Singer Sargent, for example. They were all men. Were there any women that you were paying attention to when you started out?
I as early on, before I started painting, like Annie Leibovitz was someone who I just thought, wow, she's following her passion and she's creating. Have read a lot of books on the French Impressionists and Bertha Morisot, who painted with Manet, Mary Cassatt. There are some women trailblazers, Frida Kahlo, who just was stubborn and determined to paint, Georgia O'Keeffe. These women were creating, following their passion, throughout their lives. And they were very inspiring too.
And when you look at your work and how you've evolved, would you say that it's essential to have the tuition that you've had over the years? Because I'm wondering, because you are so talented, what your art would look like if you had never had a lesson, if you're completely self-taught.
I laugh because, I did take the art class that my husband had given me as a gift. What I also did, because my time was so limited with the young kids, I would actually invite artists who I admired, contemporary artists, to come to my studio and do a workshop. Maybe I wasn't able to attend the whole time, but I would pop in and out. So, I really tried hard to study with those women artists that I really admired. But I will tell my students, compared to a lot of artists, I am pretty self-taught. I mean, I didn't go to art school, art academy. And I also say, though, the joy and the beauty of that in that I didn't go to school with a whole bunch of rules as far as you must do this, you can't do that. I don't have those rules that a lot of art academy people have. So I'm kind of feel like I'm freer to experiment, obviously make mistakes, but also to, have some successes too, because experimentation is a big part of my methodology when it comes to painting. So I did have a really solid grounding in drawing and drawing skills. And I think to be a fine artist, if you have to be able to draw before you can paint. I tell my students too, I play the piano, and I say, if you play the piano, you can't just start by playing a concerto. You have to start with your scales. And so painting is it's that same progress. You start with the scales, and then you move in, you get more and more complicated as you go. And that's how I look at the painting journey as well. You have to learn, you have to draw, be able to draw, perspective, vanishing point, human anatomy, all of that creates that fundamental basis for a successful painting. Color and paint application is kind of the final 5%, I think, of a well executed piece of art.
I'm glad you mentioned the piano, because I was coming to that and your musical talents as well, because you played the piano for quite some years.
I think it was about 16 years, played the piano. I was never, my husband can sit down at the piano and just, listen to a tune and then play it. And my mom was a beautiful pianist too, but both of us, we could not play by ear. We had to read music. So, but yes, I played the piano for quite a while, which I'm glad I had that. That was, I think, my mom's way of keeping me inside the house a little bit.
And I know music is important to you. Still, looking at your playlist, you have a very interesting compilation there of artists and genres. Where does that fit into your life now, if it's not always allowed in the studio?
I wish I was still playing piano. I do once in a while, but I haven't. If I had my druthers, I'm over in the studio painting. So, but music is important. It's very important for my husband. He plays the sax and the guitar and the piano. It's background noise for us, as far as, I'm always in awe of musicians and, people that can sing and is something that's a talent I just do not have. But, boy, it's beautiful to listen to that.
Do you have goals of other things that you want to do besides painting?
First and foremost, obviously, goals for painting are always there. I have goals of, like, now that the kids are launched, my youngest graduated college last spring. My goals now are, I kind of almost selfish though, but to really get out and enjoy nature. I'm very much a type A personality. I think always my biggest goal is, every year it's my New Year's resolution, is to stop and smell the flowers and just take a deep breath and just absorb, just be happy in the moment. And for me, that continues. That would probably be my biggest struggle, because my mind is always on to the next project or the next issue or the next thing. So, personally, for me, it's to come to a place in my life where I can create and enjoy and not feel like I'm constantly trying to reach a deadline or moving on to the next thing. I want to just enjoy the moment. And that's probably my biggest goal.
Now, I know you lost your father, Michele, and your mother is in the latter stages of Alzheimer's. When we look back on our life, there's always major milestones. There's always events, sometimes tragedies, but, happy events too. Mm-hmm. What would you describe as your major milestones and the things that have changed you in some way?
Well, I definitely think the passing of my father was a milestone for me. He was a very, very strong presence in so many people's lives, especially us children. Very dominant, very, so it was a bittersweet passing. It was, the first, as a kind of a growth. That's been almost 17 years now. But, I think when you lose a parent or both, all of a sudden no matter how old you are, you think, oh my gosh, the parent's gone. And now I'm that generation. We're the old generation. So that was a philosophical kind of a mindset change for me when my dad passed. I do think, we've been dealing with my mom's illness for almost 6 years now. I don't have an answer to it, but it has sure caused me to pause and really think about life and how fleeting it is, and how, when you see somebody in the final stages of cognitive decline, you learn to not take any day for granted, and spend as much time with my kids, my husband, family, and kind of circling back to that, my goal of pause, being able to take a moment to, really absorb what's happening at the moment, enjoy the moment, and not live for the past or not live for the future, but to just try to live for what today is bringing.
And what would be a favorite way to spend the day then if you weren't working?
Probably hiking up in the mountains, hiking, or on the shore, on the water, out on the seashore. I did do an amazing trip with girlfriends this past September. We went for almost a week and a half up in the Dolomites, and we're hiking from town to town, and just to get away from social media, disconnect from our phones, just enjoy nature, enjoy each other, and just take some time to give our minds a little bit of a break from all the day-to-day stuff going on. It was very much a life-changing, wonderful, peaceful trip for me to do. So yeah, it would be being out in nature, I think, or sitting and reading a good book and not having to be interrupted.
What would be a good book for you? What's on your nightstand?
Oh, right now it's so I always have a book on tape that when I'm driving back and forth to Montana, or if I'm flying or traveling, I have an audiobook. So right now my audiobook is The Women, the story about Vietnam that just came out. And my book I'm reading is a Michener. I've never read Michener's book, Hawaii. So I'm just coming to the end of that book right now. So, Wallace Stegner's one of my favorite artists, Ayn Rand. I fiction, historical fiction, I love. I don't find that I read too much nonfiction, but I do love my historical fiction.
So Kristen Hanna's book, then, The Women.
Yes.
Set in Vietnam with the nursing corps.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing you like to bury yourself in.
Yep, exactly.
Very good book. One of the things we say about relationships, Michele, is how we just want to be understood. That's primarily, yes, to be loved, but to be understood. Do you think art and you showing your body of work now, is that something that helps people understand you? Do you feel that they understand you through your art?
I think that's a good question. I do. I do think that our personalities, our true essence of who we are, it comes out in our work. I think it has to, because art is created. We create from the heart. And I think why that's so scary also is because art is such a personal reflection of who we are. And if we are showing our art in public, we are really exposing ourselves and our vulnerabilities to people, and to critique, and to be questioned, or under the good and the bad. So yes, I do. I think everyone who knows me personally and they know my art, they say, gosh, your art is you. It's who we think of you as a person. And for a long time, when I first started painting, I felt that my art had to have a deeper had to always have a message or a deeper meaning. And I finally was comfortable really just believing that, if somebody looks at my art and it brings a smile to their face, or it recalls in them a memory of a time or place or look, that is dear to them, then I feel like I've succeeded in my art. I don't strive to have a deep meaning that's buried under the layers that somebody, I just trying to make the world a more beautiful place and make people pause and just smile. And if I can do that, I feel like I've succeeded with that particular piece.
You sound like a very happy and content woman.
I have my I'm a conflict, right? Yeah. Yes. Yes. When it comes, I think that's what art has done for me. But I think with any artist, I mean, there are also the anxieties and I'm not doing enough. I definitely have my moments. You can ask my husband where he has to kind of help me out of my tree and say, hey, whoa, let's step back and look at everything. So, but yes, I think it's a work in progress, Chris. So it's definitely a work in progress. But I feel as I am getting older and maturing that I'm able to really look back and really celebrate the opportunities that I've had.
And what are you looking forward to this year? Do you have any shows, workshops that we should know about?
Let's see, what is this year? I'm actually really excited. Next year, I'm going to be doing a small group show at the Booth Western Art Museum in Georgia, which is a wonderful, like at the top Western art museum in the country. One of there's a few that are amazing, and the Booth is one of them. We'll be doing a show there, which is a huge. I'm very, very proud of that fact. So I'll be spending a lot of my year working to prepare for that show, and then I do have in the works a new gallery that I'm not able to talk about right now, but it's New York and London, and it's more of I'll be able to take my work more to little more to the abstract than I'm doing right now. So I'm spending the year experimenting and really kind of pushing some of the limits for that, which is inspirational for me to be able to do that. And then just my typical, I've got shows that I do every year, museum shows that I do every year. I am heading to France to teach, where I'll be teaching in Provence in June, this coming June. So I guess that's the next big thing on my calendar is a trip to June, or trip to Provence in June, and then my family is meeting me at the end, so we'll be able to spend a little time together, which will be exciting and fun.
Do you have any galleries on your bucket list that you would love to show at?
Yes, there's one in LA that I would love to show at. The galleries, it's so interesting because I spent, when I first started painting, my goal was just to get into gallery, and I got into so many galleries. And as I've gone through this journey, I realized I just really would like one or two wonderful, amazing galleries that I can establish a long-term relationship with. And so that's I've spent the last probably 5 or 6 years getting out of galleries. And then I'm looking for that one or two galleries where I am a perfect fit, where I complement their existing stable of artists, where I can just, work with, just consolidate the number of galleries that I'm working with. So that I always take my approach to galleries. Take a more of a long-term approach. It has to kind of be organic, and I have to make sure that they are as excited about me as I am about them, that it's a two-way street. And so I think things are in the works, and I think it's all going in a good direction.
Well, your art is certainly cause to be excited, Michele. I want to wish you the very best of luck with it for the shows to come and your plans ahead of time. And thank you again for coming on the show. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you, Chris. I love talking art and honored to be your guest. So I love the podcast. So thank you. Thank you so much.
And you'll find a link to Michele's social media and to her website in the show notes. You'll also find a link to our Instagram account, that's the AART Podcast, where you can follow us, leave your comments and questions and suggestions for guests too. We always love to hear from you. My thanks again to my guest this week, Michele Usibelli, and to you for listening. I'll be back next week with another guest from the world of visual arts, so I do hope you'll join me then.